I'm on the last of the 3 Larks I got from that Christmas gift pack, and I've saved the most potentially interesting one, well, at least to me, for last. The Lark Tasmanian Peated Single Malt Whisky. Now, unlike many of the Australian peated whiskies that source their peated barley from Scotland, Lark use local barley and smoke it with local peat from Tasmania. Alright, so this has got me ever so slightly curious, and I've heard some rather good things, so let's see if they're true. Shall we? This is Whisky. I'm John Chidgey. Always remember to drink responsibly in moderation and where and when appropriate. Feel free to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and visit engineer.network/whisky without the E to learn how you can support the show. Thank you. In the last few Lark episodes, I went over the ups and downs and ins and outs of Lark, and it's quite the tale, to be perfectly honest, but it's Australia's modern history of whisky. There's just as much of that sort of thing that's happened in Scotland, of course, but that's not my country's history. Beyond the politics, though, Lark have also genuinely pioneered several things, including a different way of peating malt. Driven by the necessity, to an extent, they call it a post-malt smoking process. On the Lark website, they describe the post-malt smoking process saying this: "We smoke 2 tons of malted barley with 100 kilograms of our very own peat over an extended period. This style of peat smoked barley imparts a different flavour profile that traditionally peated whisky does. Expect more chocolate and earthy roasted coffee notes to come through." That sounds pretty interesting. Now, due to the cost of building your own malting facilities, considering the size of the market in Australia and the extremely small amount of peated malts being asked for, Lark and pretty much every other distillery in Australia buys their malted barley from a malting house, and those companies then provide non-peat dried malts. When you're malting a grain, it needs to be kept in a warm and moist environment to encourage germination, and as you turn it over and over to stop it growing into adjacent grains and break up this carbon dioxide, you need to pick the right moment to dry it and stop the malting process. You can do that by quickly drying it, and you can use any kind of kiln, but if that kiln is heated with peat, its smoke gets drawn deeply into the grain, and it's drying, leaving that peaty, smoky flavour embedded in the grain. With Australian malting houses not really set up for that, as a result, Lark received their malted barley unpeated. In order to still peat the malt, Lark placed that malt in a large smoking box and exposed that to a slow-burning peat fire to infuse that peat smoke into the malted barley. Peating in this way doesn't capture anywhere near as much as peating whilst the barley has just been extracted from the malting process and dried, but it's the economically better choice. Maybe that'll change someday here, who knows. But for now, it's what we got. All that's nice and lovely, but this is Tasmanian peated, which means the peat comes from Tasmania. Now, to my knowledge, only one distillery in Tasmania was ever given a license to mine peat, and that's Lark. The license permits the removal of small amounts of peat from the peat bog Lark have leased in the Western Highlands of Tasmania. The Belgrove distillery, also in Tasmania, uses a legal workaround in the regulations to access peat from Peter Bignell's friends' private property for their peated offerings. Although technically it's not formally licensed to do that, it's technically not illegal either. Whatever. Okay then. Tasmania's blanket bogs in the western half of the state cover over 10,000 square kilometres, and unlike those in Scotland, ours haven't been drained and stripped over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the government wants to stop that from happening. So they're very tightly regulating the peat bogs to ensure that woodlands, fires, and development don't encroach upon or damage those peat bogs in any way. The Tasmania Peated full-size bottle costs $205 Australian for a 500ml bottle from Dan Murphy's, of course, because Lark, with a corrected 700ml price of 287 Australian dollars. It has no age statement, it has a 46% ABV, and there is no information about whether it's chill filtered or if it's coloured. Presumably it's not chill filtered given its ABV, but really I don't know. It's considered to be part of Lark's signature range. The website tasting notes are as follows. Earthy peat intertwined with a delicate floral character and sea spray. On the palate, floral peat develops amongst dark chocolate and oyster shell. Ooh, and hints of coffee and marmalade. How did oysters get up into the peat bog in the Highlands? Whatever. On the finish, ginger snap biscuits, sea spray, and subtle ash. Again with the sea spray up into the Highlands. Whatever. I am genuinely curious. This is the first Aussie peated whiskey I have ever tried. Again, waiting for the poppy pop. Ooh, pop. That is almost, I would say that is almost it's like a deep copper color and searching for legs. Give another swirl. There we go. Slow to form, moderately running. All right. My first Aussie peated whiskey. You're going to be shocked to know that I can smell peat. Great. Yes, John. Peat. It is very lightly peated. It is a floral peat. It's more like a Highlands, like a Scottish Highland peat. If I could describe it, it's certainly not like a strong Isla peat or a Talisker or anything like that. Being my frames of reference, of course. Can smell some nice caramel on that. I find with peated whiskies that the peat can sometimes you need to almost let the peat air out a little bit and peat off and get the peat out. Peat out. Yeah, peat off. It's still not peated off yet. And I find that initially on the initial nosings that will actually distort the flavour a bit and you can't quite get to the next layer. At least I can't. Maybe I need more practice. That's all right. Okay, here we go. Let's see how we go. Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Oh, that is chewy, oily. Oh, that is so chewy. God, it's got a delightful finish on it too. Beautiful, warm, peaty, smoky finish. It is a woody finish. It's a woody smoke, not a peaty smoke. It's sort of similar to the peat level in a Loch Lomond, like a 12 or an 18 year Loch Lomond. And the finish is more woody than peaty, kind of like the way I feel about the Loch Lomond 18. I mean, it is very, very nice. Interestingly, I think that the finish on this is probably moderate. It's not quite as long as a Shinotto cask, but it's a very different finish, as you'd expect. Okay, now I can actually, on the second nosing, as that's blending in with that finish, I'm getting a bit more of that saltiness. I can actually smell a tiny bit of brininess on this. Oh, there's something else in there that's really interesting. It's like a burnt caramel. Maybe a burnt toffee. It's certainly got that. It's certainly got more of a bitterness on the second nosing, that's for sure. That peat's dying away and I'm getting a bit more of that sweetness on it. Oh, that is just lovely. I mean, that is lovely. I'm getting a little bit of that ginger now on my palate, and that bitterness now. I'm definitely getting I'd say it's a moderate dark chocolate, and it's quite a darkish chocolate, and that bitterness. I'd actually almost prefer to say it's more like a burnt toffee. Like the bitterness feels better described as a burnt toffee than it does as a dark chocolate, but I can see why you would say dark chocolate. I'm not getting any oyster or anything, but then I hate oysters, but I know what they smell and taste like. Oh, that was once and once only and never again. That's really is another story, and I'm not doing that. Not today. And I'll be buggered. I can actually get a scent of coffee beans though, and not dark roasted, like a like a light to moderate roasted coffee. A little bit like the Glenallachie. Some of the Glenallachie's have got a little bit of that coffee taste to it, which I don't mind. But, oh boy, how do I rate this? This is more complex than the Chinotto and a lot more complex than the Classic. This is far more interesting. Oh, but the Peat, I've got to admit, the Peat was a little bit of a letdown. I expected it to be unique, different, and it just isn't. I mean, it's nice, don't get me wrong, and I mean, an Aussie that's peated, that's actually made from Aussie peat from Tasmania, and that's great, that's fantastic. I don't mind that at all, yeah, in theory, but practically speaking, it's not that different from a Highland peat. It just isn't. All right, so let's rank this puppy. First and foremost, cost is a 3. It is stretching the budget just a little bit, and it is heading up towards a 4. It is not. It is oh dear. But when it comes to the quality, I mean, to me, this is a 4. It is an amazing drink. It makes me giggle, makes me smile. I will enjoy this slowly. But you know what, though? I can't hide the fact that I'm a little bit disappointed in the peatiness. It is really very subtle and not that different from a Highland peat, like a lightly Highland peat, like a Loch Lomond 18, which is significantly cheaper. And that makes it, overall, that makes it a yellow. You know, keep a few bottles in this category for something different if you like. But out of the 3 Larks, just to recap the 3 Larks, I've got to be honest, if I could pick one that I was going to put down some of my own money on, it'd be the Chinotto cask, hands down. And that's mainly because it's unique, it's different, and it is gorgeous, it is delightful. So is this, but even though it's more complex, it is also almost a dime a dozen. It's almost like I've got so many other options that are less than half the price of this that I could grab that I would enjoy almost as much, if not just as much. I don't mean to be harsh. Maybe I had my expectations were set a little bit higher. Maybe, I don't know. But either way, that's how I see it. That's how I feel about it. But it is still a fantastic dram. And it is a 4. It's a low 4, but it's a 4. And honestly, I'm still super impressed with Lark as a distillery. And what they're doing for Oskies. They are some of the best Oskies that I've tried. Having said that, I still got lots more to try. So we'll see about that. And with that, cheers. See you next time. Maybe for some different Larks or something else. I'm going to do something else for a bit. Aussie smoke in my whiskey. The tar, ugh. Nip my finger on that. Fucking working hazard.